ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to COASTER-net Update. We've got breaking news from Six Flags as this morning they made their chain-wide announcement, as they've been doing for the last several years now. I am Danny Miller, back from Europe, back in Binghamton, New York, alongside Jeff Goodman. We've got our pinch hitter here lately while I was in Europe, and now Andy's buying a house. So, Jeff, you've been very, very busy these last few weeks.
Yeah, they both left, and they left the keys, so I've just been sitting here on the couch.
Yeah, so you're kind of our pinch hitter for the last month or so now. So we're going to talk about the Six Flags announcements. Surprisingly, at least surprising to me, some people poo-pooing this a little bit, and I don't think it's all that bad as a whole.
Yeah. I think as a group, it's it's what I expected, a mix of everything.
Yeah, that's the thing. So we're gonna kind of go rapid fire here until we get to the big stuff at the end. Lots of water park additions. They're taking a page out of the Cedar Fair book. It seems there's Cedar Fair doing a lot of water park additions for 2020, and Six Flags doing the same. One of the most notable at Six Flags Great America up there by Andy, they are doing Tsunami Surge, which they're calling the world's tallest water coaster. Looks like one of those pro slide style water coasters, similar to the, I guess, Thunder Rapids was the Fiesta Texas one a few years ago. Hershey added Breaker's Edge a year or two ago. This seems to be very similar to that. They're saying it's 86 feet tall, 3 uphill blasts, 5 drops, 5 turns, 28 miles an hour, 950 feet long. So kind of looks like one of the, it's got those weird discs at some of the turns there that we've seen out of some of these newer water slides. I don't know if those are supports or whatnot, but that's kind of one of the big additions there at Great America. Also, a similar one coming to Six Flags Whitewater in Atlanta. Python Plunge also has the some of those weird discs, 5 stories tall. So 2 water coaster type additions coming here. We had a couple of play areas that looked like they were coming. A couple of places getting Wahoo Racers as well. But they renamed a few of their water parks. Whitewater in Oklahoma City near Frontier City is going to become Six Flags Hurricane Harbor, Oklahoma City. And what's the other one? Magic Waters is becoming Hurricane Harbor Rockford as well. So Six Flags is sort of spreading their Hurricane Harbor brands out to some of the water parks that they acquired last year. And Andy and I had talked about that last year. We thought since they picked up a few water parks, if they would extend their branding out to those parks. And it looks like they're going to do that. So I don't know. What are your thoughts here overall on the water park stuff?
Some of them look pretty cool. I know the one in Rockford, the now Hurricane Harbor Rockford, is getting something called the Tidal Wave. It looks kind of like one of those, ones where you get flushed down the toilet a little bit, where you kind of go around in a circle. They also talked about a lot of them adding like tropical theming and just kind of the added aesthetics of switching brands basically. The what was the other one that was a big change was Six Flags Hurricane Harbor Phoenix is getting Paradise Island, which is a giant 1,200 square foot activity pool that's going to have volleyball and basketball. I'm curious to see how that works. It's also going to have a lounge, shade, restrooms, dining. So that sounds like a large area that they're adding to that park.
Yeah, and the one up by me here, Darien Lake, which is a couple hours away from me, they're getting this Wahoo Wave, which looks like those. It looks like the wall slide, the Hyena Falls or Colossal Curl. I think it's one of those wall slides. So they're doing. Cool. Yeah, they're cool additions. Darien Lake is actually. Historically, their water park has actually always done pretty well, even though it's up here where summer is not too awfully long. But Darien Lake has tended to pay more attention to their water park, at least since Six Flags gave them up, a decade and a half ago. They had always seemed to focus more on the water park than the dry side of the park. So it seems like Six Flags is kind of they added the Star Flyer this year. I think, the Six Flags Skyscreamer. So they're going back to the water park for Darien Lake this year. So, overall, they a lot of water park additions, but I think most of them are pretty good. Now, you and I, we're not really water park people. Maybe Water Parker would be able to chime in a little bit more here on his thoughts. But generally, they got a couple cool things coming to their water parks.
Yeah, and they do have a bunch of standalone water parks, so I expect that this is going to be something that we see every year, that there'll be a fair amount of water park expansion.
Right, and they tried out that water coaster at Fiesta Texas a few years ago there with Thunder Rapids, so now we're starting to see them sort of sprinkle out to some of the other ones, so I wouldn't be surprised if more of those are coming down the pipeline the next few years for some of the other parks. Now we'll move on to some of the non-coaster rides, some of the flat rides that are coming. Six Flags America getting Harley Quinn Spinsanity, which is a giant discovery pendulum type ride. Over Georgia they say it's a new Gotham City area. I'm not sure if it's an expanded Gotham City or if they're revamping the current Gotham City, which already has a bunch of stuff in there. They're getting Catwoman Whip and a scrambler type ride, which they're calling Poison Ivy Toxic Twister. Now, the Catwoman Whip at over Georgia, I think, because they put in a giant discovery last year, I think, and what did they call it? Pandemonium. So this year they're doing the Catwoman Whip, which is one of the new Endeavor style enterprises, I think.
I think it's the same as like the one that they put into like New England. It seems to be the one that's just under the Giga.
Yes.
Level.
Okay.
Because they didn't claim that superlative like
right. Speaking of superlatives, Six Flags Mexico is adding what they're calling the world's tallest giant discovery, which they're naming Crazanity, which is what Magic Mountain called theirs 2 years ago when they built the world's tallest giant discovery.
And Wonder Woman's Lasso of Truth at Great Adventure is the same as well. So
yes,
it's tied many times.
Well, and those giant discoveries are really fun rides. And, Discovery Kingdom put one in a few years ago. Kennywood has had one for a number of years. I've been on several of them. They're really fun rides. They're one of the more fun flat rides, especially the really big ones where you get some good speed, you get some good G's on it. So I'm not opposed to these going into more parks here. I probably wouldn't ride it at every park, but if you have time, that's the type of ride that I would ride. Now, then we have, I'm going to skip these next two that you have on the list because they're a little bit more interesting to me. Yeah. Six Flags New England is getting the Zamperla Endeavor, which they're calling Supergirl Skyflyer. Six Flags Magic Mountain is doing nothing. They're basically doing more with their Haunt and Holiday in the Park because their 2019 ride isn't ready yet. So maybe they were afraid of getting jokes, but they're just expanding their two events and they're still working on West Coast Racers at this point.
They said that these events are going to happen in the new underground area.
Right. Yeah. So
it's going to be something new, I guess.
I guess so. Maybe they're adding to it there, so that's fine. We're still waiting on word as to when West Coast Racers will open up. I haven't heard an update on that in quite a long time.
Six Flags is complete.
Yeah. Okay. So Six Flags Fiesta Texas is getting what they're calling the tallest ride of its kind at nearly 50 feet. It's basically a Zamperla air race where the whole tower actually goes up in the air some. All the air races that I know kind of stay close to the ground and don't really go up or down. This one looks like it's going to go up and down. So I don't know if that's going to make the ride feel any different. It'll look pretty cool. They're calling it the Daredevil Dive Flying Machines.
It's got some kind of steampunk theme to it too. It looks cool.
Yeah, it does look cool. So, and those air races are a lot of fun. Those rides are a lot of fun. So, that's certainly going to be it's going to be a little bit of a skyline ride, I think. So that'll be kind of cool to see one of those up in the air.
I told you that it doesn't sound very tall, but
no, it doesn't. But
it'll look cool on the Midway. I don't know if it'll look cool on the skyline.
Yeah, I guess it depends on where they put it. I didn't really take notice as to where in the park it's going. If it's going towards the front of the park, you might see it. Otherwise, it might just be a nice ride to look at while you're walking by it. It might look a little cooler than if it was just on the ground. You know, airplanes 2 feet off the ground doesn't really look that cool. So if they're 50 feet in the air, maybe it'll look a little cooler. The highlight for me for the flat rides, though, were what they're doing at Six Flags Great Escape, or the Great Escape, a Six Flags theme park, and Six Flags St. Louis, oddly enough, which is a Zamperla Turbo Force, which at Great Escape they're calling it Adirondack Outlaw, which I think is an awesome name. And then at Six Flags St. Louis they're calling it Catwoman Whip. So we're being very creative here at Six Flags St. Louis. So when I looked at this ride, it reminded me initially of the skyscraper ride that was at like Cedar Point and then Dorney Park and then Valley Fair, where it was just the big windmill with like 2 seats on either end. But this has more seats on either end. It's basically a giant propeller. This has more seats on the end. And I think Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, one of the expansion packs, had a ride exactly like this. I don't remember what it was called. I think Planet Coaster has something in there as well. It's weird because Planet Coaster also had, when it was released, the Tourbillon, and it was called the Cube, which is the 3-axis rotation, like the Cyborg ride at Great Adventure. And a year or two later, we saw a few of those pop up. So it's kind of interesting that now we're seeing a few of these pop up when Roller Coaster Tycoon and Planet Coaster had them a few years before. But these look really, really fun.
Yeah, they're big. The St. Louis one has the stats on their page, and they're calling it 164 feet tall, 52 miles per hour. I'm assuming that the Great Escapes one is the same model, but I did notice in the artwork that the one in Six Flags St. Louis had the 8-person, and half of the ones for Great Escape had 4, and half of them had 8. So it's basically like either 2-2 back-to-back or 4-4 back-to-back. So I wasn't sure if maybe the artwork wasn't accurate, or or if there maybe one is a bigger model than the other. But it's going to be the largest ride at Great Escapes. I mean, it's a park that doesn't really get big thrill rides, and this is a pretty big ride for them.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they haven't had a coaster in quite some time, a big coaster, and they don't have a whole lot of tall rides. Their tallest ride is really their drop tower, which is right there at the front of the park. So I don't know, again, where this is going, but this will certainly be a skyline ride for them for sure. And St. Louis doesn't have a ton of tall rides either. They have coasters, but nothing that's huge. So for St. Louis, this will be a real nice ride that'll kind of stick out too. Who knows with the capacity? That's kind of interesting. I would usually say, well, the renderings are usually pretty accurate, but Hershey Park's renderings of their coaster only showed 6 rows, and then they said on Twitter that it would have 7. So, I don't know if I trust the renderings anymore these days, but I guess we'll find out once it starts to be built.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the artist is going to draw it so it looks cool. Maybe it doesn't represent what it is, but I did notice that one little thing when I was looking at the pictures. I'd expect them to be the same, though.
You would expect them to be the same, but if anything, if Great Escapes was smaller, then I guess that wouldn't shock me. Any other thoughts on the non-coaster stuff before we get into the 4 coasters that they announced?
No.
All right. So we'll move in. We'll start with the 2 smaller coasters, and then we'll talk about the 2 big ones. Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, they're adding Sidewinder Safari, which looks like a spinning wild mouse with a jungle-type theme here. They used video of Ragin' Cajun from Six Flags America. Now, I had read somewhere that someone was saying that this was a relocation. And I haven't seen confirmation of that, and I haven't heard that anywhere else. I saw that at one spot, and the only reason I would think it would be a relocation is if they moved Ragin' Cajun.
I don't know. There's no wild mouses that I'm aware of that just closed down recently or anything like that. It does look like if it's brand new from Zamperla, they did a lot of purchasing from Zamperla this year.
Well, and that's what makes me think that maybe this is a brand new ride and not a relocation. The fact that they've got a couple Endeavors, they got a couple of these Turbo Forces, they got the Giant Discoveries. I mean, pretty much all the dry park editions,
Yeah.
all the non-coaster dry park editions are pretty much Zamperla rides. Oh yeah, the air race too. So pretty much all their dry park editions that are not coasters are pretty much all Zamperla. So it wouldn't surprise me if they bought one of these coasters from then. I'm just trying to do a real quick search here, see if I can find anything.
The Q line is supposed to have like a reptile exhibit in it as well, to kind of like go on the theme of Discovery Kingdom.
Yes.
So that's kind of a neat little thing that they're adding to it. I mean, just something to do when you're in the queue as well.
Yeah, and that park does have that park is it's very unbalanced in the sense that you walk in, if you've been there, you walk in and you see all the coasters. And all the coasters are right at the front of the park, and then in the back of the park is where a lot of the animal exhibits and a lot of the smaller rides and the eateries are. And that's because when it was Marine World USA or whatever, before it was an honest to goodness theme park, when they turned it into the theme park, they sort of just encroached into what was the parking lot and moved the parking lot and then just plopped down all the big rides right at the front of the park. So I'm interested to see where this actually goes in the park, to see if maybe it's back towards the animal areas or if it's sort of in between. I know the Boomerang is kind of in the back of the park, and they have a couple of bigger flat rides that are towards the back of the park near some more of the animal areas. So I'm interested to see where this actually gets placed in the park. I do not see anything that says this is a relocation. So it very well may be a new ride. I do not see any evidence showing that this is a relocation of Raging Cajun or another one from elsewhere. Moving on with the coasters, we do have one that we're pretty sure is going to be a relocation. Viper, or Viper, at La Ronde, which is going to be the much anticipated relocation of the Green Lantern First Flight coaster from Six Flags Magic Mountain. At least that's what it looks like. Obviously, I haven't seen any formal confirmation on that, but we do know that Magic Mountain is removing theirs, so it would stand to reason that this is going to be Green Lantern from Magic Mountain going to La Ronde, which is what Andy and I had speculated some time ago. We said if they're removing it and relocate it, we highlighted either Great Escape, La Ronde, or Six Flags St. Louis as the most likely options because none of them had the 4D free flies, and they would maybe make more sense for a low-capacity coaster. So La Ronde it is for Green Lantern.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was going to go to New England to complete all their pairs. Pair of Boomerangs, pair of 4Ds, pair of Frisbees, pair of wipeouts.
Yeah, well, that would have been a story if they would have taken out Green Lantern and put it right next to Joker, since they already have two Boomerangs next to each other. That would have been something.
Yeah, they gotta embrace it.
Yeah, exactly, right? Just, we recycle, right? Sort of like the Dorney Park of the Six Flags chain. So La Ronde is getting V-Pair, the Intamin Zaxpin is what they call it. 40, some people call it a ball coaster. It's Green Lantern First Flight from Magic Mountain seems to be going to La Ronde. All right, let's talk about the two big ones now then. We've got two big coasters. We'll start with Six Flags Over Texas, which is getting, it's Aquaman Power Wave? Is that the name of it here?
Power Splash.
Power Splash. No, hold on a second. Why do I want to call it Power Wave? Power Splash I know is the model name. Aquaman Power Wave is the name of the ride, and it is a Mack Power Splash. There we go. Okay, so we got that straight. So Aquaman Power Wave is coming to Six Flags Over Texas, which is a Mock Rides Power Splash. This is the first one in North America. I'm not sure if there's more. There's 4. Apparently there are 4. Oh, the other ones are still. One is under construction, supposed to be opening this year in China, and one is slated for 2021 in South Korea. So right now there's only one other operating one, and that is Pulsar at Walibi, Belgium. which
Do we know anybody who's been to Belgium recently? Oh,
yes. This is a ride that we have talked about for a while, and it's funny. Andy and I, a few years ago, when they were teasing Wonder Woman at Fiesta Texas, we had predicted that it would be a mock Power Splash, and they got Wonder Woman. Recently, we had speculated that Six Flags Over Texas was going to get a single rail, a clone of Wonder Woman, and now they're getting a Power Splash. So over the course of the last 3 years, Andy and I have nailed the coaster editions for the Texas parks. We just had them flip-flopped. So Aquaman Power Wave will be essentially a clone of Pulsar over at Walibi, Belgium. Like you said, I rode that ride just 2 weeks ago on the big European vacation. Fun rides. Here's what happens, and I'm looking at the renderings. It's hard to tell here because they're not very good. The one at Walibi, Belgium has a turntable in the station. So what happens is it has a turntable. You have one car sitting on the track that's loading, and then you have another car that's on the course. And when the car on the course parks and the one that's loading is ready, the turntable turns 180 degrees, and then vice versa. The car in the station unloads, loads, while the other cars run the course and, rinse and repeat. No pun intended. It does, I can't tell here if there's going to be a turntable on this one.
I couldn't imagine how else they would do it.
The rendering does not show one. That doesn't mean there won't be one. I did comment on that when we were riding Pulsar. I said, I hope if Six Flags Over Texas is getting one of these that they do the turntable, because it will be a popular ride because it gets very hot in Texas in the summer, as we all know. And the boats only seat 16, I believe. The Pulsar, I believe, was 16. Maybe it was 20. This one looks like it's 20 if the renderings are correct. So it's 5 rows of 4. According to the rendering here, so it's 20 per boat. So hopefully they have the turntable to run 2 cars here. Basically what happens here is you're in the station, and behind you is a speed hill, and then behind the speed hill is sort of the splashdown area, and then on either end it's got these big vertical spikes. So you start by going backwards. You go over the hill, over the speed hill, through the splashdown area, and the water is lowered. So they let all the water out so you don't splash down on that first pass. You go up the back spike. Then you come back through the splashdown area that has no water in it, over the airtime hill. You're accelerating. You do get airtime on the second pass. You go up the big vertical spike. Then you drop back down through over the speed hill again. You accelerate again while going backwards, which to me is the best part of the ride. Lots of really good airtime when you go backwards over that hill the second time. Some good speed. You go through the splashdown area again with no water, up the back spike. And it's really cool to watch as you stall out on the back spike. You can see the dams open up and all the water rushes in. And then when you come back down, you splash down into the splashdown area and you slow down at that point. So you go backwards, forwards, backwards, and then when you come back through, you do the splashdown. Fun rides, forceful rides. If you're in the front, you get wet a decent amount. It's not really a big wave that comes over the front like some of your shoot-the-shoots rides. It's more of a spray that you get. If you're not in the front row, we didn't get particularly wet unless you were sitting on the end. Then your arms and your shoulders would get a little wet. Maybe your hair gets spritzed a little bit, but it's more so of a spray, sort of like think about the wettest you've ever gotten on a traditional log flume. You're looking around that. You're not looking like Whitewater Rapids ride type where you're going under waterfalls here.
That sounds pretty good. As long as my shoes don't go on my way off, I'm happy.
No, and what's interesting about at least Pulsar, the way you sit in it, it has the mock-style seats and then lap bars that come down. So they're sort of like bucket seats. They're very comfortable. So now I'm a shorter guy, as most of you know, but my feet did not actually touch the ground because you're sort of sitting back into the seat sort of like on a B&M hypercoaster. And the lap bar comes out of a box. At least on Pulsar, they come out of a box. So you can actually put your shoes up on that box and keep your feet off the floor if you don't like having the wet shoes. So the wet shoes were not an issue on this ride at all. So if it's like, well, I want to ride it to get the coaster credit and try it out, never ridden anything like it, but you really don't like getting wet or don't like having the wet shoes, I would not worry about that too much on this. It's not really a get your shoes soaking wet for the rest of the day type ride.
How about for the people off the ride? Do you get like the nice spray like you would on Shoot the Chutes?
Yes. Walibi Belgium did have a splash zone very close to the splashdown area, and you do get very, very wet if you are in that Wasserspritzen-Zonen, as they say in German. I don't know how they say it in French, which is mainly what they speak there in Belgium. But Wasserspritzenzone is the splash zone translation there to German. It does look like they're going to have one here. It's right in front of the Justice League ride there, so I would imagine they will have a splash zone of some sort there out in front of Justice League. This is going to be right at the front of the park here, so it's a cool ride. It's a cool looking ride. It looks really weird with these spikes on either end. It is a fun ride. In my mind, it is I won't call it a really strong addition, but I'll call it a good addition and a solid addition, especially for a Texas park. You put this at Six Flags New England, you put this at La Ronde, maybe I'm not so hot on it, but the fact that this is a ride that you could run for most of the year, with the Texas weather, you could run this March through October, November if you really wanted to. Probably not something that they run during holiday, but this is a ride that you can run for most of the year if you wanted to.
Yeah, it sounds perfect for Texas. And the stats are pretty cool. It's just under 150 feet. It's 148 feet tall, 63 miles per hour. But this is not actually the only thing that Texas is getting. They have also changed their schedule. So Texas is a 10-month park in the past, meaning that they're closed in January and February. They're going to go to 12-month operations, but not like a 365 like Magic Mountain did.
Right.
So they're adding in weekends and holidays. I'm guessing like maybe President's Day, stuff like that. And that's going to add to their calendar and make it a little easier for people in the winter to maybe go to both Texas parks.
Yeah, because Fiesta is now 365, right? Did they go to 365 last year? So they're probably sort of testing the waters here a little bit. Arlington is a few hours farther north. They do get some colder weather than San Antonio in the winter. I've been down to the Texas parks for holiday in the park, and they can get some chilly weather up there in the Dallas, Arlington, Fort Worth area. So I would imagine you're going to do weekends. You're going to do President's Day. You'll probably do Martin Luther King weekend. They'll probably have some long weekend operations there where they're open for a few Fridays or Mondays as well. And who knows, if that goes well, maybe they'll think about going to a 365 if they do well with this pseudo year-round operation, as I'll call it, where it's year-round but not 365 yet, but we'll see. It's good to. It's going to make it easier for people to get down to those Texas parks in the off season if you haven't been down there. With Fiesta being 365 recently, and now weekends at least year round for over Texas. If you have that Six Flags pass or that Six Flags membership, and you haven't been to the Texas parks, now you can look at doing both of them in the off season.
Yeah, I think it's good enough. I mean, the weekends for like you said, travel.
It's a smart conservative move for them to kind of test the waters and see what the attendance is like during those times. Yeah. All right, now the Six Flags park closest to both of us really here, Six Flags Great Adventure. For quite some time now, we had thought that they would be getting the big addition this year. They were really the only ones teasing a lot here. And it seems like people were pretty spot on with the scramble. Now, I don't think they actually confirmed what the teaser meant, but if you unscrambled the letters, it did say yes, RMC or RMC yes. And Six Flags Great Adventure announced the Jersey Devil coaster, which I'll probably call it Jersey Devil from here on out. No need to put the word coaster when we're talking about it. I explained this to other people, though. Some people were complaining about the fact that they put the word coaster on the end. And it's not as weird of a thing as you think. Volcano, the blast coaster. Wavebreaker, the rescue coaster. Wodon Timber Coaster, Blue Fire Mega Coaster. You know, all the parks, a lot of parks have been doing this recently. It's just a marketing thing to tell people, hey, we have a new roller coaster.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it with the Larson Loops just to convince people that they have coasters, and the Harley Quinn Crazy Coaster. This isn't as weird of a thing as it really seems. Most people are just going to call it Jersey Devil anyway. So what is the Jersey Devil? It's an RMC Raptor single rail. They are calling it the tallest, fastest, longest single rail coaster. 130 feet tall here, according to what we have, 58 miles an hour, over 3,000 feet long. They say that it will have 4 trains of 12, which is extended from the 2 clones that we got last year, Wonder Woman and Railblazer, which were 8. So we're increasing capacity a little bit there. It does look like there's a mid-course brake run type area here that would allow for some pretty quick dispatches, which is probably also allowing them to run the 4 trains. So could capacity be an issue? Sure. It's going to be better, hopefully, than the 2 that we already have, because we've got longer trains, we've got more trains, we've got longer track. The mid-course is there to set up for some quicker dispatches. So I don't know if I would cry foul on the capacity here quite as much as people seem to be doing. And let's be honest here, the ride looks pretty damn good.
Yeah. And you know, if you can load 48 people in say 3 or 4 minutes, that's not that bad. I mean, if they can keep it moving. I mean, even if they can only do 36, but
yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, if you're able to dispatch a train every minute to a minute and a half, let's say it's a minute and a half, that's 48 people every 6 minutes, which isn't great. But if you look at one of their wood coasters, say, El Toro's a bad example, but if you look at a standard wood coaster that has PTCs or GCI that seats 24, that's the same as if one of those were doing 3-minute dispatches.
Yeah.
So 3-minute dispatches, unfortunately, seem to be kind of the norm in the industry at some of these parks lately. So when you think about it that way, it's really not too different in terms of capacity than a lot of your other rides. Even a ride like Nitro, where they sometimes seem to stack 3 trains where they're doing 36 every 3 minutes. Doing 24 every 3 minutes obviously isn't as good as Nitro, but it's still not terrible. So I don't know. I don't know if I'd be too concerned about the capacity. Is it going to have a long line? Yes. A lot of rides at Great Adventure have long lines. It's partially due to the operations. Yes, it's partially due to the fact that they just get a lot of people. And this will have a long line because of those things, but also because it very well could be the best ride in their park. Looks like we've got a lot of good airtime hills here. Now, they were claiming 2 inversions, but it looks like
3 to me.
It looks like a third, and I'm going to leave your lovely spreadsheet that you created for us to reference here and look at the pictures. It looks like there's, after the first drop, we've got this dive loop type thing that we saw on the 2 clones, and it also looks like we have a stall and a 0G roll. So, yeah, it definitely looks like 3 to me. I don't know where they're getting only 2.
We're omitting the dive loop as one because they were highlighting the stall and the 0G roll.
Yeah, that must be what they're doing here. I mean, it certainly looks like I can see the dive loop. It's sort of sideways at the top of the loop, so I could see why maybe they're omitting it. It certainly looks like it certainly looks like an inversion to me. I would call it an inversion. But the nice thing here is that this is a very long and narrow layout, which is interesting.
Kind of like a double out and back.
Yeah, really. And what's funny is I had to laugh because the one rendering, you can see this ride, and then you can see Nitro right next to it, which looks almost exactly the same in terms of the shape of the lift hill and it's the contours of the hills and everything. It looks kind of funny that these 2 rides are going to be next to each other, but the layout looks really fun. We've got a lot of airtime hills. We've got some of RMC's signature inversions. If it's as forceful as the smaller ones that we've had for a few years now, this is going to be a very, very fun ride. And for me, I am more than fine with this being the headlining Six Flags attraction for this year. I think this is going to be a really good ride. I kind of put the single rails somewhere in like my 60 to 80 range in my steel rankings. Everything indicates that this would be better than those two for sure. It's longer. It's got more elements, hopefully more airtime, taller, faster, longer. So in my mind, this could potentially be a top 40, 50 roller coaster, maybe even better. And for me, that's very good news.
Yeah, when I saw the other two, I was kind of expecting this to be very twisty and more compact. And when I saw the long stretched out layout, I was surprised. It's going to have a nice setting because it's right along the water there in the seaport. Yep. I thought they would try to cram it into the corner, but it looks like they're going to be taking over maybe almost the whole seaport or the entire seaport. So
it kind of looks like they're and that area back there is not very strong there. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of that goes away. But this has all the makings of a very, very strong ride. It's got a nice drop. Like I said, if the current single rails that we have are any indication, it will be very fast, very zippy, very aggressive, which people have come to expect from the RMCs. And it should be very, very strong in terms of the forces that it provides. So for me, I'm very, very happy that this ride is coming. I don't know why people seem to be poo-pooing this. It looks like a very good ride to me. It certainly gets my interest back up in Great Adventure. I've made no secret about it that Great Adventure has become very tired to me over the last several years. I typically only go once a year for the ACE event, and I don't go any other time just because I've ridden the rides there so many times. And aside, Justice League is the only edition from the last 5 or 6 years that was really of any interest to me, and it's just because I have one close to me. I've ridden pretty much all the other ones anyways. This to me is a reason for me to go to Great Adventure maybe more than once a year when I have my Six Flags Pass or membership. This is a reason for me to not wait until September of next year to go to Great Adventure just at the ACE event and to go sometime in the springtime. So for me, that's a big win.
Yeah, and I'm okay if it's not the best ride in the park because I really love El Toro. I like Nitro. I like King Ka. If it's not better than those, it still could be a really great ride.
Exactly.
And it's also adding something really different for the area, and it's the only non-B&M ride that goes upside down at the park. So it's going to have a way different feel.
I didn't think about that. I guess that's right. I didn't even think about that. Good point. So that's interesting. And let's be honest here. The fact that Great Adventure is arguably the flagship of the chain. You've got Magic Mountain, you've got Great America over Georgia, over Texas, some would argue because it was the original. But Great Adventure is one of the biggest in terms of attendance and in terms of the number of rides they have. For many, many years, that was the flagship where they put all the big investments like King Ka, El Toro, and then they moved Green Lantern there. So it was very, very odd to not have an RMC at the park when so many of the other parks had at least one. Some have more than one. So for Great Adventure to finally get an RMC of any type, I think is notable for the coaster world for sure. And I expect this ride to perform very, very well for the park.
Yeah, and it's a big plus for all of us rude people on the East Coast.
Yeah, exactly, right? This will be with the single rail in Texas and California. This will be the first Raptor-style single rail coaster that many people here on the East Coast ride. This will be their first exposure to it. So I'm really interested to hear thoughts of people who are, in our area who will experience this type of coaster for the first time.
Yeah, and it's a big market. New York City and Philly are the two big cities right around it. That's 30 million people. Plus, there's big cities inside of the metro area. Like Newark and stuff. There's a lot of cities around this park. So,
and we've talked about that for a few years. We've talked about that for a few years where we were shocked that Great Adventure kept getting passed over for big additions in favor of some other parks like your Over Georgias and your Fiesta Texas. Now, those are in big markets as well, but Great Adventure being in arguably the biggest market in New York, it really seemed odd that they had not had a headlining coaster for many, many years. This fixes that and resolves that issue that we've had for many, many years with the Six Flags editions. So I expect that the park will do very, very well next year, and I expect that this will be one of the top rides of 2020. And 2020 is going to have a lot of good rides. Orion, Candemonium, RMC Gwazi. There are plenty, but people are underestimating 2020 for roller coasters. For some reason, people do not understand how many good rides are being built for 2020. And we haven't even talked about a lot of the Busch stuff yet. I mean,
I'm still waiting for that full rendering of Pantheon. I mean, that's something I'm really looking forward to. And
right.
Primordial is such a huge question mark. I feel like that could be a shocker too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've got Pantheon. We've got the Wood Coaster coming to SeaWorld San Antonio. SeaWorld San Diego is getting the Dive Coaster. I mean, very, very quietly, 2020 is going to be one of the strongest years for coaster editions in quite some time, I think. People are not giving this 2020 ride class enough credit here, and I think it's time we ought to start recognizing 2020 is a very big year for coasters, and I think Jersey Devil just sort of adds one more character to the hit parade list here of the rides that we can ride in 2020, because there's a lot of them.
Yeah, and we will have to wait until next year to figure out which one's the exclamation point.
Yeah, exactly. There's certainly going to be a lot of contenders. So that kind of wraps it up here for the 2020 Six Flags editions. Any final thoughts from you, Jeff?
Congratulations, Zamperla.
Yeah, seriously, they must be doing very, very well. I would it would stand to reason that they are doing a little bit better than S&S at this point, which is having a lot of issues with some of their rides. And Six Flags appearing to not go back to S&S for at least the 2020 ride, going back to RMC and boy, Zamperla for just about everything else, right? Yeah. So congratulations to them. And I think this is going to be a real solid year for Six Flags as a whole, and a couple of really good coasters to look forward to. So that will wrap it up here for our discussion on the 2020 Six Flags announcement. I am Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
I'm Jeff Goodman from Long Island, New York.
And ride on, Ride Warriors. See you next time.